We have Mheshimiwa Grace Kiptui, who is a former woman rep for Baringo County, joining us in the studio. Good morning, Grace.
Good morning and Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
Yes.
Welcome again to Kenya's biggest conversation on this side of 2023.
Thank you.
Ulirukia wapi?
Nilirukia wapi? Eldoret. The city of champions.
Ndu can't remember where she was. So such a long time ago.
Thank you for that last part of why. Because you want to make it seem as if I was somewhere lost in space.
Such a long time ago. You don't even remember. Was it this year that you were at that place, or was it the other? I don't even remember, right?
Right.
Grace was in the city of champions, Eldoret.
Wonderful.
Yeah. Now, Grace, thank you very much for joining us. And timely that you've actually come to join us, because the last time we were speaking, we were talking about what needs to happen in terms of making people to see development and what development means. Then we've also talked about the very many things that you raised when you were a member of parliament in, what was that? Was it the 11th parliament?
Yes, 11th.
It was the 11th parliament in 2013 to 2017 with regards to empowering communities. Now we are in the midst of the worst drought in a generation in this country. It was declared a national disaster by former President Uhuru Kenyatta in September 2021. We have still very many people who are facing starvation, 4.5 million people in dire need of relief food. And the government is giving updates and saying, look, we need to think about how to feed more, because there are counties that are classified as alarm drought phase. These are the counties of Kilifi, Mandera, Marsabit, Samburu, Turkana, Wajir, Kiptui, Isiolo, Kajiado. And then others are in the alert drought phase. These are Garissa, Lamu, Narok, Tana River, Makueni, Tharaka Nithi, your county of Baringo, Laikipia, Meru, Taita Taveta, West Pokot, Nyeri, Kwale. Embu is classified as normal drought phase. Millions of people in dire need of food today. Millions of people needing to be supported and being fed today. Now, the government has been doing relief food. The government has been running an livestock off-taking program. Hasn't taken off-taken the livestock from everybody in the community. So animals are still dying. People are basically losing livelihoods on a daily basis. What's the way forward? What's the future?
Thank you. First of all, let me say I was born in an Asal area at this Baringo, and I heard you mention that county as one of the hunger-stricken areas of Kenya. I can relive my moments way back in 1965 when there was another worst drought like this one, or worse. And I look back and I wonder whether we learn from what experiences that we go through as a country. And after learning, what do we do to ensure that the next cycle, we are ready for it? According to me, I think we are very sporadic or reactive. And immediately we solve that problem. We don't continuously ensure that by the time the next cycle comes, because we have the weather patterns, we know how our country is, we know which parts are prone to hunger. But what do we do as a country to ensure that we are ready? To me, I think the most key problem is, I don't know whether we have a very good distribution policy of food. Because as you mentioned, those others who are affected, the others who are not affected, they are a bit lucky because they are in a certain part of the country which is productive. But how do we move that food from where it is to where it is needed? I think there's a problem there of lack of distribution.
Do we actually lack a distribution network?
I think so, because we should be planning in a manner that we have stores in those areas once we harvest, we ensure that we store it in a good way. And then they are moved to those areas before the drought strikes. And when it strikes, then they are given the food.
So what's saying essentially that we know that these areas are prone to this kind of geographical behavior. We know it in advance. And so what if we're being prescriptive about what ought to happen, is that because we know what the land looks like, we know what it is likely to produce or not produce, we know that geographically there will be drought at a certain time just because of the area within which this part of Kenya is situated. So there ought to be plans to deal with that time when it comes. Right now, the mitigation efforts are that 4 million people need to be given relief food in these areas that we've talked about. We're not talking about let's plan. We're saying that today, Thursday, they need to eat something today and tomorrow. Is it sustainable, or is it the right way to go?
You see, when we're in the middle of it, like now, we've got to give them food. And that means concerted effort from everybody, civil society, non-governmental people, other governments. We just, as it has been declared, that conversation needs to be very present. I don't think I hear it or I see people reacting positively to it and moving to give, because the pockets of how to give are not even very clear, So I think for those of Kenyans, like now they have harvested, like in September, November, they are still even harvesting up to now. But what is the conversation they are getting? People may have planted potatoes, cabbages. They were even complaining in Laikipia that it is rotting in the farms. So why don't we then do it practically? We just tell people this is a problem in our hands and we need to deal with it. And then there are updates every now and then. And encourage the population to be sensitive to those other people.
But then, so there are two things that I'm hearing here. One is in the areas where the regions with high production, they have a problem with glut at harvest season. The regions of low production, they have a problem of scarcity. Now, we are in an open market society. Open markets would mean that demand basically just ensures that there is supply, because supply will follow demand. Now, if there is demand in the low production areas, why is that demand not being met by supply? Because there is a source within the same country, in some instances within the same region.
I want to believe that, you see, when we say demand, it would mean those guys in the low scarcity areas moving to or attracting from the high potential areas.
Yes.
But then I don't think they are in a position to help themselves at this moment. So there is need, for example, if people contribute to the hunger or relief, there is need to move that food, and even if it means buying from these others and distributing to the others, so be it.
No, that we're talking about now. Okay, so right now, because of course of the dire situation that they're in, they don't have the purchasing power.
Yeah.
But ordinarily, because you say, normally we seem like we don't seem to learn. Every time, every cycle, every harvest season, we have high production, we have food going to waste, and these are the sides, the ASAL areas, they have low production, they are not getting that food. That food basically goes to it goes to waste. Why is in the market thinking of, okay, there's going to be some need after a couple of months? Those guys in low production are harvesting now, but their food was, in low volumes, so they'll need something.
Yeah.
Why are you saying that? What are these things that will be hindering the market from purchasing, storing for future consumption later?
I think the problem could be, you see, you are considering the purchasing power of those characters in the low production areas. They are mainly pastoralists, and they are set in their ways. They issues like bananas, avocados, things like that, it is not part of them.
They don't eat.
They don't eat those things. I remember there was a time there was a problem in my county, and I called ladies to come with whatever they can from the farms. Some brought bananas, some brought avocados, a lot of it, because it was a lot.
That's what they have.
But when we distributed, those people kept it, they left it on the floor. They took the bananas.
The people in Baringo.
Yeah.
They took the bananas, they left the avocado.
They left the avocados on the ground. And they said they didn't know what it is. You know? So there is that issue about helping these people learn that you consume whatever there is for survival sake. And also we should have a program where I was seeing in the TV a lot of animals dying, and why not slaughter them and store the meat for a rainy season?
And this is one of the things that we're saying. So shouldn't this strategy then be at a graduated level? Because if we look around the country, there are those areas, many, that are currently or looking at, as a result of the rain, looking at glut. The pouring away of milk in some cases, the throwing away of potatoes, animals that are dying, which, like you said, can actually be stored. These are things that we know traditionally, but then now imagine if it's at a graduated level where, from the national point of view, we are looking at storage capacity of drying meat, which has been done for centuries. Yeah. Drying meat, and then it can be reconstituted later, sold later. We're looking at dehydrating milk, putting it in powder form that can then be bought and used later. We're looking at drying potatoes that also can be reconstituted later.
Even bananas.
Bananas.
So many things. Even
absolutely. Drying them and then hydrating them later for use. Desiccating maize and things like that. Shouldn't this be at a national level? Because it is the same national government today that is looking for relief food to distribute. So you can imagine if it had been stored. So then all you're doing is moving it from storage and then bringing it to the people who are in need at that time. And you don't have to go through this struggle because you already know that this thing is going to happen.
Yeah, that is the issue. That lack of concerted effort, that lack of planning, lack of continuing to do it. It shouldn't be that after, when the hunger, we stop. It should not be. We should not stop. And those animals which are dying there, they should be slaughtered before they become whatever, and then you store the meat. Then restock when the rains come. Yeah, they will still multiply, and they will be there for them.
I see sociocultural issues. Just from the example that you've given and the question that I was asking about market and market demand. If people from a certain region do not eat certain things, you take cabbages, they don't eat cabbage. They don't eat avocado. They don't eat carrots. They don't eat this. And those are the areas where they don't grow carrots. They don't grow cabbages. They don't grow avocados. So the people who have the carrots and the cabbages and the avocados will only sell to a small market, and then the others will go to waste. Even if that market, I'm not talking about here the market as a system, actually bought the carrots and avocados and went and stored them and packed them and dried them, there'd be no market. Because the other side, culturally and socially, they don't consume them anyway. So this is just without a period of drought. So in that period when there's no drought, the market is not incentivized to actually make sure that they're taking off everything that's being produced in these high production areas. So the same thing happening with livestock. Culturally, this person will not sell their cows. I have 1,000 head of cattle. They're fine, they're not dying. You're coming to tell me, now you can start buying because you see the National Drought Management Authority and the Weather Meteorological Department have started predicting that, you may not have sufficient rainfall, so you can now sell off 30% of your livestock. The guy will look at you and tell you why. I'll sell when I need to sell. So those issues, I think, also play a big part in why this thing does not move. It becomes an emergency, another point of emergency. Even now, the government is not distributing dried milk. It's doing powdered milk and canned what? It's distributing what people know. Mahindi, mchele.
Maragwe. But anyway, I think as a government, the government should intervene because they have the mandate to kind of come up with a program and tell these guys, within this time, these animals are gonna die. So we better have them slaughtered and the meat stored, and you will be given. You eat them when the time comes. Because I also find it that the Mwananchi himself, they're not responsible for their own well-being. During my youth, at our home, my dad would store honey, and it should never be touched by anyone unless there is hunger.
Mm-hmm.
They used to collect kumbe, those white ants. Then they bind them into some paste, mix with the honey and keep it there. They would keep things like millet. Millet, it doesn't have any problem with the doo-doos and things like that. So it is kept in a particular store which nobody touches. Because they knew there is a rainy day. There is a time when we'll need it. Okay, meat. They would slaughter meat and put it above the fireplace for smoking. And we would not touch it because we know it is for that time, But right now, I think people are not looking at that and preparing for it, even at a personal level. Because there is this issue that, okay, the government will rush in if there is a problem. But the government needs to force people to do certain things for their own well-being.
If you look at a traditional society and you've painted a very good picture, they had granaries. They may not have been huge in size, but it was for that very purpose, knowing that there would be a time when we wouldn't have the food that we have. In fact, historically, this town called Kisumu, is actually Kisumu with an O, Tusumo meant precisely that among the Luo community, meaning when you don't have food as a result of drought or whatever problem you have, Tusumo means you go so that you can be given food. Now, that is in lieu of butter. But the understanding was that you, in turn, should that cycle now work against that other community, they can also come to you. So this mitigation against these natural disasters existed traditionally.
They were there. They knew.
Because these climatic changes and cycles was understood. Because again, here are people who would dry, among the folk that live around the lake, they would dry their fish. That's how it came about.
For months.
Now, the modern world in which we live in, we are not the only continent where you have pastoralists. You've had pastoralists all over the globe. And there are lessons they have learned because they've also had these cycles are global. It's not as though Kenya is the only place that has it. And because of science and the understanding of technology, there are ways in which some of these natural disasters can be mitigated against. Because if these areas we speak of as the ASAL areas, and the problems are now becoming perennial, meaning it's like almost every year you have a similar problem. In a lesser degree, but it's still there. Now, surely, what Mheshimiwa talks about in terms of slaughtering, it isn't that difficult. You don't really even need what you call a fixed abattoir. It can be mobile. I mean, what I'm trying to say is that there are very many ways. And yet, despite the knowledge that we seem to have in this country and research that has been done in those areas and the mitigation that have been suggested, when we have the dire situation we find ourselves in, it means very little of what was suggested and what was planned has been done. That's why we have the same situation recurring, and we're talking about the same thing over as though nothing has ever happened or nothing has ever been proposed to mitigate against it.
So where's the gap?
The gap is that nothing.
Because you've said there is a lot of data and information on this.
There's a lot of research that has been
Kenyans
done.
are very bright.
There are many programs that are run by government around these areas.
There are many programs that the government says it runs around these programs. They exist. They are even funded. And they even have a name. They even have people who actually look after them. There are people who are in charge. They pay personnel. But when you have the dire situation we find ourselves in, year in, year out, you have to ask, what do these people really do? Beyond talking about what they do.
Sure. And let's also acknowledge the fact that in the time that it is happening and that you want to mitigate, it is too late to mitigate at the time of the emergency. It is too late. And I think that's what we keep saying here, that this drought situation is perennial. You already know, for example, that there will be another stint in 2023. The geography will tell you that it is going to happen. There are organizations that are set up just to see what the pattern is going to look like, and they tell you in advance
with accuracy
that this is what is going to happen. And so we're saying that if traditionally, historically, that these have been planned for by communities and individuals and families. We have an example here of honey and termites being stored and fish and meat in the fireplace. It's not just your father in that area who did it. I'm sure
It was everywhere.
many families did the same thing. It was a communal thing. People did it. If communities did it, it was tradition, it was understood. And the question continues to be, if these individuals who understood it passed it on in terms of knowledge to generations who are alive today and find themselves in government as experts, people who live in the community, why are we not able to replicate the same at a graduated national level?
I think I'll bring it back to the issue of the community. Like you said, what are citizens doing about it? Do they have this knowledge? Was it passed on? Was it actually taken up by the current generation? Let's take a break, though.
This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day.
From a woman rep for Baringo County, we are talking about the pain of hunger in the country. And she says relief food will not end suffering in ASAL areas anytime soon. We've got to do more. Karone agrees, because Karone says if we fuse agriculture, hospitality and food nutrition, it'll be very easy to introduce our communities to new delicacies. Anything cooked well will be embraced. Catering companies should have stalls in the ASK shows. People will learn to eat new meals. We have plenty of food. You agree?
Yeah, I agree. And I was also thinking during the break about devolution. The government is now nearer. Governors who are from ASAL areas, they should have programs on how to deal with their unit, called the county, as far as those issues are concerned. And having the mandate, you can even mobilize the community, the professionals, the churches, whatever. I mean, if to me, I think all what is missing is a concerted effort and planning. Yeah. Because if there was a way where our governor would call, for instance, and say, okay, in the next few months, there will be an issue here, we need intervention here. I'm sure Wananchi are very, very willing to assist their own, for example.
Yeah.
But do we do that?
Even mobilizing resources. For example, if, let's just be direct here, if we look at the way the community of northeastern Kenya mobilizes resources for business, okay, just take Nairobi as an example. You see, the Somali community in Nairobi is able to quickly mobilize resources and get into business, new business ventures. Somebody has a business idea and you talk to them and they tell you, you actually go to the community and you say, I pitch my business idea. And people say, how much do you need? People put in money and you're able to start your business. If you think about livestock production, livestock off-taking, the abattoirs that CT you're talking about, and the community leadership, it would be possible, not just for the hunger time and the drought times, but constantly to have a well-structured livestock industry in those counties. We're talking about those three counties, Garissa, Wajir, Mandera. Some of the leaders, some of the community leaders, some of them are actually serving as President William Ruto's economic advisors, own abattoirs in the city. So they know what it takes to set up an abattoir. They know what it takes to get that abattoir getting livestock for export. So it's ideas that they could actually mobilize on. How can you set up an abattoir in my home county of Mandera? so that the community knows where they can send food, send the markets, establishing markets, establishing the abattoirs, getting that meat processed. Meat gets to the Nairobi market already processed, or the external market already processed.
How very right you are, because if you look at, say, for instance, the government plans to start off with infrastructure, roads, and then look at how the government is trying to expand the airport facilities within the country. What on earth are we doing having abattoirs only in Nairobi? There are no cows in Nairobi, apart from the ones we see struggling along the road. The places where you actually find the product,
They're in the assholes.
that's where you should have an abattoir. Now, we already have airports in some of the northeastern or the northern part of the
Isiolo
country.
has an international airport.
It does have. So this issue of transportation, the road network has improved. Why kill half the cows just by transporting them on some crowded truck when you know full well that this is something that could be done there? See, as you were talking, I was thinking of my neck of the woods and the fish cage farming, which was not just growing but becoming lucrative until the fish started dying. And there's a whole debate around it. Fish were being poisoned. The experts said, lack of oxygen. But then if you look at it, it revolves around the pollution of the lake. The factories around it, industries around it, and what the government has not been doing. Yet we have NEMA to ensure that the lake isn't polluted. Now, that's a consequence. So an industry that was slowly developing. It isn't as though the Mwananchi doesn't have the initiative. The question that was on my mind even as we were speaking, does the Mwananchi move ahead of the government and do things despite the government, or try to find ways of working with the government? I look at something like education, and I look at the private sector of education and how it is, again, individual initiatives. The bulk of the new schools we seem to have in the country are not built by the government. Look at the health sector. It's the same story. Now, but the government provided an enabling environment, meaning in the absence of the government willing to license such enterprises, they also wouldn't exist. So what am I saying? We have success stories where the government, through the means it has at its disposal, have worked with the citizenry to actually better the lives of the citizenry. And I'm thinking, this matter that we've been discussing from time immemorial about drought and the problems in some of these semi-arid areas and arid areas, that same effort doesn't seem to exist. It's like the people who are there are left to their own vagaries and to their own issues. Because even this issue of banditry that we keep talking about, do you really think that if an industry such as the one we are speaking of, like an abattoir and other industries that are peculiar to those particular regions, were actually there and livelihoods could directly be derived, do you really think some of these things that we see would actually exist?
They would not. And I think there is also lack of support.
Yes.
Or a nexus between the government and the citizens. Because I really believe that if populations were mobilized, they would do wonders. Yeah. And they would that support needs to be seen, even at the level of, you remember those guys, they were called what? The agriculture extension officers,
Yes,
like that.
yes.
They earn salaries, they are existing, but you never see them in the village. They never come to talk to anyone. They never encourage people to plant A or B. People who used to plant maize and beans, they need to be, encouraged to plant other things, like millet, sorghum, things that can be dried and kept. And also to teach them how to store food. Because I think one of the issues is lack of storage. They may work very hard, they harvest, and then it goes to waste. And yet we pride ourselves as very learned people in the country and all that. We are able to, but why is it that they are not encouraged and they are not assisted? Case in point is, in my youth, I used to hear President Moi all the time taking yellow maize to Gambani. I don't know whether Muga you remember.
Not only do I remember, I've eaten that yellow maize.
Yes.
It was called molio.
Yeah, so it used to be taken almost every time But right now, apart from Kiptui, where you have mentioned, and other, affected areas, that community of Ukambani, they changed.
Machakos and Makueni are not on the list.
They changed.
No, they're not.
Why? They were encouraged by their leadership, I think, and maybe non-governmental organizations and things like that, to adopt new ways of feeding themselves. And they planted a lot of legume, fruits. They even feed Nairobi. Maembe and all those things, they call beets and oranges generally.
Yeah.
And green grams and all those things. You don't take yellow maize. Case in point is that community. Why is it that we don't mobilize the others? Yeah.
What do we need to do that? Is it changing policy? There's a policy.
The policy is there. We need to just roll our hands and do the job.
Policy. There's an entire agriculture sector policy. There are laws.
And we have an entire research portfolio called CalRO.
Yes.
Who support this. So whatever you do is relevant. There's no guesswork. They'll tell you this is what works for you here.
Yeah, but there is this disconnect where it's like it is said and never done.
Never done. What do we need to do to get it done? Like you've said, if food and food security is a devolved function now, with agriculture being at the county level. So what is it that counties need to do, county governments need to do? Because that's the one basic and most direct thing that you're dealing with your people on a daily basis. You come and show them that I changed it. We used to face periodic starvation and periodic hunger. We have stopped it. People see it.
Yeah. Even organize tours,
Yeah.
From
other areas.
Those are the areas, take them to Makued, let them see. Because that community, I really allowed the community of Ukambani. They really moved, and they took it, with a stride.
Yeah.
And they have changed that relief kind of situation.
Mheshimiwa, let's look at the county you come from. They've had similar problems for a long time.
Yeah.
In the time, you've been in politics. What have you seen that has been done that could have changed the livelihoods of people there in the same way as you've been saying about Ukambani?
Very little.
See,
what they used to do when I was young is what they still do up to now in the rural areas. But of late, they have been encouraged to plant fruits, for example, mangoes and things, but not to the extent that can guarantee them, food.
But
cycle.
How sometimes you do something and then the result of it, you say, okay, this is good. Has there been any learning and saying from the fruit planting now, because we know that there's some mangoes, for example, that have come out of parts of Baringo and things like this. Has the result, if we plant something different, we can see the result and it is good. So then let us multiply this. Has there been any kind of learning from that? And truly, because the treasure that rests in organizations like CalRO is huge and not being used at the Ministry of Agriculture, where there's strategy that is already in place to have some of these things happen, that you can see that a community of people who never used to plant would never have a mango orchard in the middle of Baringo, for example. But you see that you can harvest and this fruit can do something. Even if you do not consume it, you can sell it and you get something, then you can buy which you will consume, isn't it? So have we seen that people have said, look, guys, this is what you can do, this is the result, and this is the benefit, let's do more of it?
You see, what I see is individual initiative, One farmer comes, he's been exposed. He plants those mangoes, for instance. Then the others say, oh, God, you mean it can happen?
It can happen.
And they multiply. They do it. They adopt. So what is missing is practical issues here. And the governors, because now agriculture is devolved, every governor, wherever you are, look at what is good for your people. And then you improve on it and expose them to other new crops and other ways of survival. And you see, like the churches, for instance, it's a non-governmental organization. These pastors, priests, and bishops, they have these people every week
Yep.
in the church. Every week, and they are not coerced. They come by themselves. And they sit there, even if he preaches until 4, they
They'll
won't
be there.
believe. How come we don't use those kind of networks to be involved in the life of the communities and show them, like now, let them plant kale and dry them for a dry season. Let them, why can the church, for instance, have departments of, touching the lives of these guys?
The way they have schools, for example.
From Monday to Saturday, they are on their own. They come on Sunday, you tell them the Bible says, and they go. And you take a little of what they bring to you, and that's it. Why is it that they are not involved in the day-to-day basis? Because long time I used to see colonial missionaries. They would make sure that they have involved the community in planting maybe groundnuts, anything that was good for that region. They would show them that it can come from here. But it has stopped. I don't see that kind of activity going on.
Because the church is extremely influential.
Very.
And they are one of the few institutions whose edicts are not really questioned. The church says, people say it's okay.
Yeah.
They have said. As you were speaking, I was thinking of how then do you get people to see? Because change is easy when the benefit can be seen. And so the example you spoke of, somebody starting it off or piloting it, it's usually been the best way of doing it.
So why can't that county government even have a demonstration farm or something?
And by the way, again, Calro and all these government institutions that do these things will be at your disposal if you ask them to come over and assist.
It just takes a phone call away.
Yes.
Or a visit.
They're looking for those opportunities.
That's what they are actually mandated to do.
So now the issue is, why aren't we moving? Or why aren't we being practical?
Mheshimiwa, you tell us, because
I think one of the issues.
You have been an elected leader, so you
one
know.
of the issues and things that may discourage even the general population from contributing to this could be the fact that we've had stories of even the relief food being taken away and used for the wrong things. Maybe even the money that comes for that purpose is diverted, probably. And then people get discouraged.
So it's a business.
Corruption could be at the center of it. That is why
it doesn't move forward.
Pushing people towards that point of
you can write the budget. You indicate the budget. This is for mobilization of India, blah blah, and then it doesn't happen.
It doesn't happen.
Maybe that could be the reason.
No. Like,
I mean, it sounds like it to me as well, because here we are looking at a situation whereby people are dying. Look, people have become so desperate that it is food in your belly that you're searching for.
Yep.
We're not talking about even trying to live a luxurious life or even trying to, no, food to eat. 1 meal a day even. Try something to put in the belly to stop you from dying from malnutrition. Children, 960,000 is what we're looking at. So it's, for me, if you look at it as a normal functioning human being and look at this situation and say, okay, wait a minute, there are things in place that we can use to mitigate this situation, but we don't do them just because the only answer for me is that there is something that's stopping you from doing this thing which you ought to do, and it must be of some benefit to you for this situation to continue.
But it is true, but as you know, Mheshimiwa has given us a clear pointer. We keep talking about the perennial corrosive self-interest that we see in many political leaders.
That's it now.
And those who are in positions of leadership. Because somehow in this country, people in those positions want to be wealthy, but they don't just want to be wealthy, they want to become billionaires. It's no longer millionaire, billionaires. Now, to do that, and you don't have a viable business that has value, it means you're going to focus on government coffers and anything that comes to the government and which is intended to help the livelihood of the Mwananchi. That will be your target. That's what you're going to focus on.
Without realizing that, you know what, if everybody is surviving, if everybody is thriving, there presents an opportunity for
business,
you to
for
also
business.
No,
thrive.
a bigger opportunity.
Isn't
Not
it?
just an
Yeah.
opportunity. It's a much bigger opportunity.
Exactly.
Yes.
And so here you are saying, well, without realizing the contribution you are making to more people dying. So for me, it's criminal. For me, it's
And,
actually criminal.
It is. And you see, there's a book I read. This Moy's book written by Morgan.
Andrew Morton.
Andrew Morton, yes. Page 45. In there, they're describing a situation which happened in Baringo in 1928. That people had starved so much that it took like a week or 2 weeks to feed a single man on his feet to be able to do a day's work. And there is a statement that at around that time, they dispatched 1,000 porters carrying food to the starving Tukens.
In 1928.
Yeah, from Eldoret through Tambach to Baringo. Then I look at 1928, and now we have not been able. We've not been able to sort out that issue of our belly.
Almost 100 years.
96 years.
Almost 100
Almost 100
years.
years.
Yeah.
And those were colonial masters. They had their own interests, of course, but why? We have been independent for about 60 years. Yeah. I'm almost the age of Kenya.
Kenya.
I'm about to be a senior citizen, and I age as a grandmother, and the thing has not been sorted. Sincerely.
Yeah. No, we need to keep
and
asking
more
these
counties are getting
questions.
into the
Actually getting
bracket.
into
Yeah?
this. Yeah.
And agriculture
It's devolved.
is devolved. So it means the people who live there, who've experienced the very things we are saying,
Are in
actually have the
charge.
money to. They are in charge, and they have the money to actually change. to
Yeah,
bring
some
about the
governors
change.
are my age.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
they've,
And they have seen this thing.
Yeah. Well, we need to keep asking these questions and raising these points. Thank you very much, Grace, for joining us today.
Thank you so much.
Always a pleasure having you on the show and speaking to you on the phone. It's been a while. I think you have been busy now. Please be calling more often. And then you keep coming more often.
Let us pray that whatever we have said will sink into some conscience of some Kenyan
Oh, yes.
who will move it forward.
Oh, yes.
Thank you.